Actually, what we're doing now is videotaping this, and we'll post it so that people can have access to the contents of the meeting at their convenience. We're going to be doing that going forward. I presume that will be posted on the website,
Yes.
which was recently launched, yes, and is nodding to me, yes.
Emmy Award winning.
The website already, it's just gone up. How did that happen? So it's www.cincy-preschool.org. Yes, Ann?
No.
Not even close.
Cincy-CINCY-promise.org. It's also, this is also live on Facebook. Rob is, no, not yet?
Not today.
Not today, okay, next time we'll do
Eventually,
live on Facebook.
right. That's right.
And we'll post the video.
We're working our way up in the social media food chain. So, I'd like the rest of you for being here as well. Well, the first thing that I want to do, well, I can't really get the agenda approved because we don't have the people here to approve the agenda. We'll do that in a moment. What we like to do at the beginning, though, is offer opportunities for comment by any members of the public who are attending, and as well the observers who are here. And actually, thank you very much, observers, for being here. You set a model for public that the rest of us will hope one day to emulate. So thank you very much.
Happy to help.
So comments, first of all, any comments that any of the observers would like to make? Good, thank you. Or members of the public, some of you will be speaking, I know, in the context of the rest of the meeting. But before we begin, does anybody have anything that you'd like to say? Good, hearing none, thank you very much. What I want to do is, I think it would be best to move on to the mission moment on the agenda, and then circle back to some things that require the discussion and/or action of the board as such. And so if I could turn things over to Stephanie, please, for those introductions.
Sure. So this summer has been really busy as we try to ramp up with provider enrollment in the Preschool Promise, as well as making families aware of the work that we're doing, why preschool is important, and helping them understand how to enroll in the Preschool Promise. And kind of borrowing from the, I would say, outstanding ground game that we had during issue 44, where we had collaboration among a number of entities in going door to door, making sure that our community knew what issue 44 was all about. We wanted to use a similar strategy in helping to spread the word about the Preschool Promise. So we have worked with Amos over the last month and a half to use a ground crew to target specific communities and neighborhoods to make sure that families in those communities knew about the Preschool Promise. We had some information from the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority as to where children live who were 4 years of age, and so we could be more targeted as we were knocking on doors. But we had a great group of ground crew actually out in the community engaging families to help them understand what Preschool Promise is all about. And so we have asked one of the ground crew to be with us today just to share their experience, why it was important for them, and the results of that effort. And so Dolores Lane is here with us today and will share what this was all about.
Welcome, Dolores. Thank you for being
Yes,
with
hi,
us.
thank you so much. Well, once again, my name is Dolores Lane, and I'm with the Amos Project. We've been working closely with Preschool Promise. What we're actually out here doing is we're going door to door to educate and inform families on how important quality early childhood education will be for them. And also,
I apologize. Hold on, sorry. Got a board member calling in, I'm sorry.
But I'm still grateful for you for being
thank you, thank you. Well, hi everyone once more. My name is Dolores Lane. You can also remember that with Lois sorry. I work with Amos, and we've been working closely with Preschool Promise. And what we're actually out here doing is we're going door to door to inform families and also educate them on the importance of quality early childhood education. And we also let them know of the resources that we have with the new voucher program for the 4-year-olds. And so a lot of the time, they'll just like to just get information. One of the most questions that we found is, where is the facility? Where is this? Where is that? Thank God we're in a day and age where a lot of people are internet savvy. So a lot of people already know about Preschool Promise, so we just love to go there and elaborate with them. Sometimes they love to put a face with what they voted for. So we're just out there just informing families of the resources that we have, and so that they can take advantage for their children. We did learn that preschool was behind 42%. So my testimony to that, my daughter was held behind in kindergarten. So I'm very passionate about informing parents of resources that they can, take advantage of for their children, so they won't have to be like me. Also, I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. I've known that our system been broke for quite a long time. When I moved to Arizona in the 3rd grade, they put me in what is called ESL classes, that is English as a second language, because I was so far behind in reading and math and things of that nature. I got to come back here and go to high school, met a lot of nice people, graduated, had a wonderful time. So I'm really passionate just to get out there because it's affected me and also my oldest daughter. And I don't want that to happen with my youngest that is 10 months old. So I'm very passionate. My voice is cracking a little bit. This is my first time doing this. And I'm just really passionate about what I do because when we go out there and we speak to these parents, that some parents, they just think this is all they have, just what's around them. So when we give them that opportunity and let them know that their children can go to quality 3 to 5-star facilities at the age of 4, not 5, they are so amazed and so grateful for that. So I would just like to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity and also Amos to go out there and speak with the public. Thank you.
Don't sit down yet, Dolores. I'm sure some of us may have questions. I have one. But I want to preface that by saying that you may have been put in ESL classes in 3rd grade in Arizona. You have made up for lost time because you are certainly poised, articulate, informed, and effective. So I really want to thank you for putting those talents to work on behalf of our children. So the question I would have for you is this: as somebody who's been out there going door to door, have you heard things from the people with whom you've spoken that you think would be important to convey to us?
Yes, sir. I'm so passionate about what I do. On some of the flyer cards, I'll even write down my personal number. So I have had parents call me like, hey, thank you, Dolores. Preschool Promise reached out to me, but unfortunately my child is only 3 now, so I have to wait till next year. But I'm like, at least you have the information, you can get enrolled in for the year prior, just so you have that information, that's power. So they're already waiting for the next school year to sign their children up for the programs. I've also had a few feedbacks as far as, oh, I called the number directly and no one's gotten back in touch with me. And I was like, well, give them like 3 to 4 weeks. It takes time sometimes. And that's really about it.
It looks like you have some friends with you.
Yes, sir.
Do I see that?
Right here. This is also Miss Renita Day. She's with the Amos Project.
Renita, thank you very much. Well, and those of you who are with Dolores, if you have information that you've heard along the way that you think would be valuable for us to know, please do let us know.
And yes, sir, one of the biggest things that we have, even if it's not feedback, but when we go to the homes of these families, the #1 question is transportation, transportation, transportation. Even with Cincinnati Public Schools, in kindergarten, there's no transportation. You don't get that till you're in the 1st grade. So they're like, hey, a lot of these parents do not have vehicles. They're already in preschool, what we call preschool desert areas. So what would you suggest, even just for these few weeks or days going, what would you suggest, or any suggestions for that?
I'm going to turn to somebody who's pay grade, that is.
And I wish I had an easy answer. There is not an easy answer. Some of the programs that we're working with do have transportation. And so giving you that information for those that do. Head Start provides transportation. and some of the community-based providers do. So we need to make sure that you've got the information on those who do have it, so as they're making those choices, they'll at least know where they could go and have that available. I wish there was a better answer. Transportation is a big issue on a number of fronts, this being one of many. And I just think we have to have a bigger solution than this table is able to provide, but it's certainly something that's at the top of the list for us to try and advocate for.
Wonderful, and just a lot of feedback from the families. They are very receptive to this. A lot of the families are very educated because we've been doing a lot of news media, so they watch the news. They're very familiar with the levy being passed last November. So we'll go to these families. A lot of even grandparents are really excited about it. They're really excited about it, and we love doing what we're doing. I came here today after being in 90+ degree weather for over 5 hours just to speak with you guys. So that shows you how passionate I am about this. So I just would like to thank you guys once more for giving us Amos Project this opportunity to work with you guys, and I hope we can go further in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, ma'am.
Right.
The peanut gallery, can we have a question?
Yes,
Sure.
ma'am.
Okay. Some of the families that you're speaking with have children that are or not preschool, but even early education, that they're already qualified. Why aren't they using it now?
Well, qualified as far as qualified from vouchers as far as job and family services.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not aware of what they can get. They're just aware, hey, I can get food stamps or I can get medical. They're not aware of, hey, I can get daycare so I can go back to school to further my education. They're not aware of that. So that's why we're going door to door to inform families, even if it's not for that voucher program, or even if you're not accepted for this, there's always something for you to do. But a lot of people, their mind may not even be on that level as far as their children's education, because a lot of parents don't even know their children can go to school at 3 years old, which is Head Start. So we're just out there basically educating parents, because a lot of parents like myself, I did not know of that. And one other question, my daughter is also disabled, so that was another reason why she was unable to go to Head Start or pre-K, Head Start or preschool. And that's another question we have as far as, is that also open for disabled children as well, or? Yes.
Yeah.
Special needs are included.
That's something that we're working actively with CPS on, actually. Yes, right. So that's a part of the plan for going forward. Dolores, thank you again for reminding us of the importance of this work that we're doing on behalf of the community. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Let me circle back around now that we've got the members of the board here that we need for voting purposes for a couple of items. The first thing is to get is to have an approval of the agenda. May I have the agenda approved? So a motion to approve the agenda. Sally, thank you, and Debbie seconds. So all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed or indifferent? So let the minutes reflect that on a motion made by Sally Westheimer and seconded by Debbie Alsop that the agenda itself was approved. We'll shift forward now to a series of minutes that need to be approved. So in your pre-read packet, we're set actually of 4 minutes. A May 31st special board conference call meeting, similar one on June 7, our regular meeting on the 13th, and then the special meeting on the 22nd. What I'd like to do is take those meeting minutes one at a time so that we're not confused about which ones we're making corrections to. So if we could first look at the meeting minutes for the special board conference call on May 31, please. I have a note or question to ask. I presume that the second bold-faced heading should be board members not participating on the conference call.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, so does anyone else have any corrections to make on this set of minutes?
I don't have that. Is that in the
It was in the
It
pre-read.
was in the pre-read, it's
Oh,
not,
it's in the-
it may not be in your place. Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Cheryl, thank you, and a second, thank you, Pastor Tate. All those in favor of approving these minutes, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you very much. So let the minutes reflect that on a motion made by Cheryl Rose and seconded by Pastor Tate that the meeting minutes of May 31 were approved, which brings us to the minutes of the June 7th meeting. I had no comments to make with respect to that. I don't know if anybody else did.
I think consistent with your comment, board members absent, it should be board members not participating.
Right, that what we should do is have a common nomenclature, right?
Common nomenclature.
Yeah, and we use participating for the board observers, so we'll make that change. Anything else? Hearing none, we have a motion to approve, please. So moved. Thank you, Pastor. And a second? Second. Thank you very much, Mike. So all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Abstaining? Let the minutes show there, thank you very much. Let the minutes show that on a motion made by Pastor Tate and seconded by Michael Cameras, that we've approved the minutes of the June 7th special board conference call meeting. That leads to the meeting minutes of June 13th. Any corrections, comments to make on these?
I have a comment on those.
Thank you.
Number 11, page 404. The action should be described by a motion, the person who made it, who seconded it, and that it was approved.
Okay. We will note that for further progress going forward and see what we can do about excavating that material in whatever records we might have. Anything else? With that comment then, I'll need a motion to approve. So moved. Thank you very much, Tim. And a second? Second. Don't be shy. Thank you, Mike. So let the, so all those in favor, please? Aye. Those opposed? Those abstaining? Doubtless this is as much fun for the rest of you as watching paint dry. So I apologize for that, but we're almost done. So let the minutes reflect that upon a motion made by Tim Fogarty and seconded by Michael Cameras, that we've approved the meeting minutes of the June 13th regular meeting, which brings us finally to the special meeting on June 22nd, which I was unable to attend, but I've heard good recounts of the meeting in a variety of ways, and this captures everything that I've heard. Does anybody want to offer any comments with respect to them? Debbie?
I have a comment with respect to those, with respect to the 2018 budget that we approved. At your place, I believe, is a correction. It says no, it's not correction. It should say a motion made by Sally Westheimer to approve the 2018 budget and was seconded by Tim Fogarty, and that the motion was voted on and approved.
Good. Why don't you give those,
I'll give
that
those.
to Creola, please, and we can incorporate that into the changes. Is there anything else that people would like to comment on? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. How about if I put you down as a second? How's that, Kim? Thank you. So all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed or abstaining? So let the minutes show that upon a motion made by Cheryl Rose and seconded by Kim Umayo, that the minutes of the special meeting of June 22nd were approved. There we go. Thank you very much for that and for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. That brings us to a discussion of the... Oh, okay. Jay, yes.
I thought I heard Ms. Laura say that kindergartners do not get transportation from the district, but they do as long as they meet the eligibility requirements. So we transport all CPS residents, whether they are CPS, private parochial, or charter school, K to 12, and then preschool disabilities students.
Okay. Good, that might be good for you.
Walking out with the wrong information.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
John, thank you so much for that. The two of you might touch bases just to make sure that information gets passed out there through the network of Amos people and others. So thank you very much for drawing that to our attention. If we could turn please to the mission and vision document. This came out in your pre-read, I presume. Additional copies are likewise at your place. Yes, it is, right underneath the agenda, at least right underneath mine at the moment. So these were circulated in advance to give you an opportunity to review them. And so let's take them one by one, mission, vision, and goals as well. I ask if anybody would like to make comments on them. What I'm going to ask is to have any input that any board member would like to make, and then I'll turn to the observers and ask if they would like to make any comments on them, if that's understood. So first, board members, anything with respect to mission? This is not the first time we've been down this road, but yes, come in.
Under mission, it says the Cincinnati Preschool Promise works to assure families have equitable access to high quality, etc. My question is, the Cincinnati Preschool Promise was designed to focus on families in targeted areas. Should that not be a descriptor of the family? In other words, the Cincinnati Preschool Promise works to assure that families within our designated areas,
So you,
I don't know.
but you mean, so to my mind, that designated area is the Cincinnati Public School District. But I have the sense that you mean something more like perhaps the quality deserts within the Cincinnati Public School
that's what I
District.
was referring
Right.
to. Is this the place for that, or are we just talking about families within Cincinnati Public School District?
We have targeted families who are at 200% of the federal poverty level, $48,000 a year for a family of 4. And that is our first priority. But we have a schedule that would allow us to go above that if we had the resources to do so. We could say with the priority for families who could benefit the most, using language like disadvantaged or low income in a mission statement is a little bit of a challenge. We could, but I think keeping it more positive to say that we are striving to reach the families who could benefit the most or something along those lines, if you're talking about that particular criteria.
I get that
Because
through the
that's-
equitable access phrase. To me, that says it, in a way. We want all families to have equitable access.
Because while we are looking at the quality deserts as a priority, we're looking at across the community for families that are at that income level. So not exclusively.
The quality deserts, the work is more geared to increasing the supply because a parent from anywhere within the geographic area who qualifies will be able to participate. I also think that those kinds of things are showing up in our work plan and our objectives. We want to leave the mission as broad as possible, depending upon what happens during the first year or first couple of years. So those should show up in in how we implement this, but maybe not in the missions.
I'll submit, because I do recognize that in mission statements, you can't be really targeted like that. So, but the fact that we are prioritizing our families, I think is important. It should be maybe somewhere, maybe in the goals.
Or maybe in the vision statement, or something like that. So how about if we take your concern and like punt it, kind of forward into the rest of the conversation. Are there others who want to make comments with respect to this? Tim? Yes?
Cultural competence is part of our evaluation process for high quality. We look to the 5-star system. What do we do to, if you will, audit for cultural competence? And if
Good
we
question.
don't do something, we need to do something if it's going to be part of our mission.
Supplemental quality doesn't currently take into consideration as a part of, and someone who is real familiar with supplemental quality chime in. There aren't specific criteria sets around cultural competence, but there's certainly training around that. And so we would recommend training around serving a culturally diverse population of students and having staff demonstrate competence in working with that population.
So it is included in our quality review?
It's included in training that's available.
Is that a requirement? Is the training a requirement in the STAR system for cultural competence? I'm very much following what you're saying, not only with the 3, 4, and 5s, but the 1 and 2s that we will be, working with. I think that's a very important point.
It's not a requirement.
It's a standard. It's not necessarily a requirement, but it's a standard that they want you to meet when you're applying for a higher quality or a higher level of a STAR. But I think it should be across the board, whether you're coming in at a 1 or 2, 3, whatever it may be. But it is something that you need to address in whatever documents that you're turning in and in your systems that you have set up in your program.
It sounds to me, I completely agree that the phrase culturally competent should be in here. And I completely agree that if it is, then that imposes an obligation upon us to review for it. And so how about if we say that we'll lateral that concern to Stephanie and management so that they can respond to us in an appropriate fashion. Okay? And Dolores, thank you for the commentary on the inside. Other comments on this from the board? Thank you very much. Let me turn then to the observers and see if there's any comments that you would like to make. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the vision and keep in mind Kumia's comment. I might as well just read it. Because of the work of the CPP, board, staff, and partners, our region values preschool as an integral part of a child's education and as an important support for working families. The community acknowledges that the best education outcomes are possible with continuous access to high-quality early learning and education programs throughout a child's education experience. Kindergarten readiness and third grade reading are short-term benefits of increased participation in preschool. The longer-term benefits in 8th grade math, high school graduation, and strong post-secondary preparation will result in a more qualified workforce and a more vibrant community in which all residents have an opportunity to thrive. What I'm wondering is, pertinent to the comment you made earlier, Kimya, if somewhere in the very early sentences there, we might have language that indicates kind of our special concern for certain target population, students at poverty levels, but also to expand the availability, because we want, because this initiative is part of a movement towards a more just and equitable society, it is incumbent upon this initiative to look to the expansion of quality preschool opportunities for our most disadvantaged children and those who are currently in these so-called deserts, or whatever the language would be. That's kind of sloppy, but you get the point, I think. Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Because our vision is that the whole community thrive, and in a way, the litmus test of the whole community thriving is the least within the community thriving. Right. So are there other comments regarding the vision? Frankly, as I just looked over and saw John Pepper's name, my guess is that conversation that we just had is a conversation that John Pepper would very much approve of, because that's something that he wants to make sure that we make the difference in the place where it's most important to make the difference. So.
Father, the only other comment I would have is, I would strike because of the work of CPP board, staff, and partners.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say.
Oh, yes, I got you.
It's a lot bigger than just us.
Yeah.
Good.
Start with our.
Great.
Anything else from the board? Hearing none, let me invite the observers to, oh, I'm sorry.
Just
Give me another one.
one comment, where it says the community acknowledges. What about, it has been well documented that
Mhm.
As opposed to.
Instead of,
As opposed to the community acknowledgement.
It's making an assumption.
Although I think that in part, what's intended to be captured here is that because of the work we do, eventually the community will value. So I think that would be another way of reading that.
Or stating that we bought in.
yes.
Right.
We bought into this idea.
They're not mutually exclusive, that the community will agree with the overwhelming research that demonstrates .
Because the research has been out there, you're right, for a long, long time. It's very well documented. I think the movement that was created through issue 44 and prior to that through Success by Six and Strike Partnership has begun to allow our community to really buy into it. From a vision standpoint, that needs to spread beyond just those who get it today to more people understanding the critical connection between having a child ready for kindergarten and their being able to thrive in the community long term.
Observers?
Two quick thoughts. The continuous access to high-quality early learning and education programs throughout every child's educational experience, I think every is really
There are
important.
every child's, right.
And then I think that the goal of all of this, or the vision, is to make sure every child is school ready, is ready for kindergarten. And that's sort of what we can hold ourselves accountable to. Everything after that, I just put on
We
the
can't hold
table.
ourselves accountable for.
Well, yeah, just the vision, it would shorten it, which could make it a little bit more accessible, but I also think just in terms of what 2 years of quality preschool can produce in terms of school readiness versus everything else, I think is something to consider, sort of ending there, but
So you're suggesting to eliminate the last sentence?
yeah, and revise the second to last.
Well, we agree that all those things follow,
Yeah.
perhaps,
I think
but that
we
the
can-
gateway to them is readiness for kindergarten, correct?
I think you can collapse those last two sentences in a way that focuses on school readiness.
I agree, you could probably shorten it. The initial justification for this was that because they were going to be ready for school, they would become
Yeah.
more vibrant citizens and earn better incomes, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we do have to see it all the way through. Now,
In other words, this functions, doesn't it, as a kind of elevator speech?
Yeah.
And so keeping it as an elevator speech is perhaps a useful thing.
And Greg,
So-
I think when we get down into what we're going to measure, especially early on, I mean, clearly we can't measure third grade readiness in 18 months. None of these kids will be in third grade. I think we need to focus on what we talk about.
Yeah, but I do agree that if all children are ready at kindergarten, but it makes no difference later, which I don't believe, of course, but then it would not be worth the effort.
Correct.
So the larger, longer-term picture is a part of what we're trying to accomplish, whether we can measure it or not.
I appreciate the commentary on this. Anything from the two of you?
I was just concurring, the sort of the link to the vision kind of caught my eye as well, and the way, however we can consolidate that to sort of capture that short and long-term benefit without stating each of them, so it would be, I think, a little more concise.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I'd like to suggest access be modified to engagement with, because it's not just equitable access or continuous access, but it's also keeping the families engaged. With housing challenges and having to move and potentially switch from one program to the next, you lose the attachment with your teachers, with your program director. So to be able to restart that in that kind of change that these families face. So whereas this continuous access to high quality, continuous access and ongoing engagement,
Yes.
something along that, because that's also part of the mission and vision, is to make sure that the families remain within these programs.
Good, thank you very much. Let's move on then to the goal areas here. I'm sorry, oh, I thought you were saying something to me. So what does CPP have for the first 12 to 18 months for the staff board? What goals does CPP have for the first 12 to 18 months? Ah. Yes, there we go. So Stephanie has made a very good suggestion that rather than having a rewrite conversation with the committee as a whole, could we have some people step forward who'd be willing to work with Stephanie, Vanessa, and others in a small group over the course of the next couple of weeks to bring this set of goals revised back to us? So that'll be an effective way to do it.
I'd be happy to.
Tim?
Happy to.
Thank you, Cheryl and Kimya.
And Tim?
Yes.
You said?
Yes, so Tim,
Cheryl, Kenya?
Cheryl, Kimya. Good, thank you so much. That brings us, Vanessa, to you, I believe, parent and provider enrollment. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry,
Can
Kimya?
we get more, if there are other comments, could they be sent so that we?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. And let me say to any one of you in the room, if you have goals that you believe are important for this organization to achieve in the first 12 to 18 months of its life, please forward them to Vanessa or Stephanie for incorporation into this project. Thank you.
So, we included June and July for our outreach efforts, which you had an opportunity to skim. We did not get to cover them. But as you've already heard, we continue to be out there in a very targeted way. We will continue, Stephanie describes our staffing, upcoming staffing that are coming on board. We get more and more excited about the more and more that we can do. We have continued to work with our agency partners. We'll continue to, we've been promoting through newsletters. So we know that our awareness is increasing, and now where we want to shift to is exactly what was just mentioned, that deeper level of engagement. So we're going to shift from broader types of engagement to more specifically, especially at providers. What you'll see in your packets is a list of all of the providers who are eligible to take 4-year-olds in enrollment, take 4-year-olds on this list, and we're very grateful that our providers are starting to sign up. And so we continue to do the outreach. We have continued to do the outreach. We also have an exciting opportunity, so to highlight some of the new things that are coming up. We have a consortium of folks around the state who are doing preschool similar programs. And so we are taking all the good stuff that we can. One of the things that we're stealing is a program called Reach Out and Read. And we're going to be distributing 700 preschool age appropriate books to pediatricians' offices that are serving children who are our targeted population. Have a meeting coming up this week to meet with providers, those medical providers, to distribute those books. You'll also see, if you looked at our website, that we have put up materials for parents in Spanish, and we also have ordered some books in Spanish. And so we're trying to broaden everything that we do. I want to take an opportunity to thank Natalie Hawk, who has been our fellow this summer, who leaves us in a few short days. We're going to miss her, who's been really supporting both the Reach Out and Read. She's bilingual. She's helped us get those materials in place. She is an educator with Cincinnati Public Schools at Roberts Academy, so she deals with bilingual students. So we've been real fortunate to have her. We also have Procter & Gamble, thanks to our partnership, our relationship through United Way, who Leisha and another volunteer coordinator, Laura, has been working with us. Procter & Gamble wants to do a volunteer project with some of our providers, which will be another vehicle for outreach to providers, a way to touch them. And they will be doing some projects in terms of cleanup or doing some yard work. But they also want to provide some kits to both the providers and the families of our providers. So Natalie has also been diligently going, visiting providers, introducing the Preschool Promise to providers and getting us out there as well. We are also looking at providing yard signs for tuition assistance and/or our logo for some of the providers who would prefer to do banners. So some of our community providers are saying, we want to hang banners up. And then we are also buying window clings. You all know that, you know, if you're a United Way agency partner, you get to put that on your materials. But again, we're borrowing from one of our partners, and you will have a window cling if you have if you're in the CPP family that says you are a Cincinnati Preschool Promise partner, that you can place in your window. So we continue to want, one, the provider and the parents to know that we are actively engaged in all sorts of ways. And we know that we have focused a lot on getting our providers enrolled, which is initial C, and now we're going to do a huge shift to working with our providers to getting our parents and our families enrolled.
Good, wonderful. Important work, thank you.
And the P&G kids have P&G products, so they're
Really,
nice.
what a surprise that is. Who'd have thought it, right? Any questions for Vanessa, please?
I just have a question on the provider list. It seems that it's being updated every couple of days. I've been partaking of the website. What's the date on this, please? Because the last one I saw.
This was yesterday.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
so what our data manager partner does, Emily's right, Emily and at least one member of her team is here. They give us daily, just because we've asked for daily right now, and then we get a end of the week. So we updated this yesterday just to incorporate what we got this week.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see that one of the observers has a question. I observed that one of the observers has a question.
I just, basic math, this is over 80. Is that fair? Is that a?
If you included Cincinnati Public.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like a celebratory moment. There's already 80 programs.
What a great way to celebrate Vanessa's coming on board in an official capacity.
And we'll have more people to extend.
There you go, there you go. Vanessa, thank you for such good work. Kenya?
Yes.
So I'm looking at this packet.
Yep.
And on the second page, it says, under quality improvement, CPP has received 3 applications from providers for quality improvement assessment.
Right.
I find that concerning, but what were your expectations?
Our expectations were to have someone on board in April, because we only had interim staff approved, but it was very difficult to have someone leave their jobs. We tried very hard to get people in the interim, but we did not, and so we've had to continue to push back. I think with the quality improvement, and I think that we talked about how much high touch of an area this will need to be. I think there's a lot of fear in this space, and that we need to communicate better that this is a support that we're providing. And so we will be introducing in a very short time our quality improvement manager, who's going to be starting and hitting the ground running fast to get us out there. We're putting the quality improvement grants management system in place now. I didn't want to get too ahead of her and putting something out there. And I think that we're going to have a participant specialist. What we heard from our providers in this space is that they needed some more hands-on assistance, and so we're going to have that person start on Monday, and she'll hit the ground running, and then we hope you'll have an offering any day now for the provider and parent. So yes, it's concerning, but I am continue to be optimistic that when we place as much attention on this as we have on the tuition assistance, that I think we'll get increased takeout.
It's going to be interesting then to see, once they get on board, what the numbers look like, say by September, you know, in this. So,
Yes, they don't look good by then, you need to.
Yeah, well, it's a way of saying that this is an issue of concern to the board. And so as they get started, they need to, the team is going to need to make sure that they're very deliberate and focused in their outreach to make sure that these numbers look better. Kimya, thank you. Debbie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we need to have some type of benchmark September, October, when we have a report back. Can you remind me, Kim, is this the group that you and I served on?
Yes.
Qualification? Well, yeah, I share Kim's concern because there were, that was quite a rapid fire process. We had so many days and nights to get that done back in April. So I do think we need to set some expectations for a pretty quick benchmark.
Well, first of all, we started the board in February. March. And we were trying to reach a deadline of school starting in August.
Right.
That's crazy.
With the thin
I mean,
staff.
really, so not really a complaint. It's just, we're just moving so quickly. We're trying so hard.
it, right?
Yeah.
Well, and we're getting feedback too that we're taking to heart. That our process and our application needs to be refined. I think it's a little bit challenging. It's long. It's got requirements that I think we have to maybe rethink, like workers' comp insurance for home-based providers when it's just one person in the home. Those kinds of things have been a little bit off-putting, and so we're rethinking those as we get that feedback.
The amount of liability that we're requesting for tuition assistance in a center or multi-centers, should be maybe different for smaller, so we need to go back to our attorney and vet some of those things that were originally encouraged in the beginning. And as we get that feedback, so again, it's that fear factor that we have folks who are able to come and walk you through it. That, and again, we had hoped to have staff on board, so I think that's been a major.
Good.
I will keep my eyes focused to this time next year.
I have no doubt that you will. Yes, Micah.
One other comment I was thinking, Vanessa, with you saying you're moving to the next phase, got me thinking about what's the next phase after that, which I'm sure you've thought about already too. But I think it may be a nice thing sometimes after school has started to have some sort of event, gathering, celebration of the people that supported the levy and have been a part of all the work over the summer and that type of thing.
That's a great idea.
So that just to put on the radar for the next phase could be a nice thing too.
It sounds like there's something already being planned.
Well, we were gonna plan, and we were talking about just doing more of a state update to the community, and Greg said, we should make this a celebration. So we are, we're talking
Smart
about,
man, Greg.
should I proceed on to the next section? Sure.
Yes, right, thank you.
So, yes, we are going to have after school starts, having a update and a celebratory event, but to make sure all the community is aware of the progress that's been made. I'm just gonna do a quick update with my backpack on our communications activity in June and July. Just a general quick list of our coverage and what we're working on now in July. We are doing paid advertising before the meeting started, and I'll play it again after the meeting, is our PBS Kids sponsorship. They don't do advertising, they do sponsorships. That is airing during the preschool programming. As well, we do an ad in the Herald. We may be doing another round of Radio 1 ads, and we are doing a direct mail piece and email to a parent database that has all the parents in the CPS district with young children. We are working on our annual report as well per the master agreement. We did need to provide an annual report by July 15th. We wanted the board to review. We're waiting for the financial numbers to come through. Jen, as I think Jill may have spoken with you about. So as soon as our financial report is ready, we will submit that. In addition to the financial data we have to report, we are laying out a lot of the milestones we've reached, because you were right. You were right that a lot has been done in a very short period of time, and we want folks to be aware of that. We have one piece of media coverage I wanted to highlight and thank United Way for. So United Way organized a day of action, which is their annual volunteer day. They had hundreds of volunteers they organized to pack the Cincinnati streetcars that looped downtown with supplies for preschoolers and preschool teachers. I'm going to circulate this backpack. They did 1,500 of these, stuffed with amazing books, school supplies, bookmarks, stickers, pencils, pens. I'm just going to pass this around because I just want to make sure you're aware of the very strong community excitement and support for this. One example is how people donated a lot of supplies and put a lot of volunteer time together to don't steal anything, folks. Preschooler, is to get the supplies together. So that was one particular piece I wanted to make sure you're aware of. That video I'll also show again after the meeting, highlighting AAA was one of the companies that came together and put together huge boxes of supplies for preschool programs. So we're excited to deliver those as part of our kits to providers. We've also launched a new website, thanks to Rob Wilson at SaberCom, Cincy-promise.org. We're working on a couple links that are not working right yet, so bear with us if you've tried to go online and click. We're correcting a few things that we have trouble with in the transfer. Email newsletter, we're still sending out a couple times a month. We have a very good database of our providers and supporters, people who are interested in following us, and are engaged on social media as well. So that's a quick run through. Communications, if anyone has questions.
Ann, thank you very much. Questions for Ann?
And I was also there when we packed the backpacks.
Oh,
And also to let you guys know, we not only packed backpacks for the children, we also did the provider bags as well for the small providers.
Awesome, yeah, that's great.
Very cool. Sally?
I don't have a question for Ann. I want to circle back to Vanessa's report if we
This
can
is
before
much
we.
more exciting.
We work so closely together.
Yeah. Wondering if we could hear at a future meeting what the barriers are that you're hearing from providers for signing up for assistance?
We sure.
And sort of what is being done to, and particularly if you're removing some of those barriers, what communication is being done to the whole provider population to let them know?
Good, let's put that on the agenda for our August meeting. So, thank you, because we'll certainly have the updated list. It will be 8 pages long, I'm sure, Vincent, of providers. I'd like to shift forward and begin talking about, shift to committee reports with the first thing will be on governance principles. I'm going to do a very quick flyover and then turn things over to Debbie Alsop and Sally Westheimer, who will take us into the topic a bit more. Please know that this is a first reading. So our purpose is to share the document with you, get whatever top-line feedback you might have, to bring it back to you then in August for your approval. So that's the purpose of this conversation. You'll recall that at that retreat that we had in the spring in March, I think it was, April 20th, there we are, that, pardon me, Denise Cuprionis joined us and walked us through a fairly lengthy governance document that scoped out how it was that we should operate at a high level and pay attention to internal organization and the like. And so Sally and Debbie came together and began working with that document and comments made on it, and kind of streamlined it a bit and posed a number of questions. So the executive committee had a chance to review their work last week, and we're very grateful to the two of them for it. Subsequently, we lateraled it over to our friends at Katz Teller, and Jacob Purcell is with us today. They must have burned the midnight oil indeed to turn the document around as quickly as they did. So from the committee of 3 here, me, Debbie, and Sally, we're really delighted by the work that you did, and I'm sure that they'll invite you into the conversation as well. But that's a kind of a flyover of how we've got to the document that's in front of us today. At the end of our conversation specifically about the document, I have 2 issues with respect to it that I want to raise that will require votes. So just to flag that for you, but I'll turn things over now to Debbie and Sally.
Sally is
Yeah.
going to begin.
So you've just done 90% of what I
Oh,
was
I'm
going to do,
sorry.
so that's fabulous.
Oh,
I will
God.
just add that one of the things that we did was compare a close to this document to the LLC document that formed the Preschool Promise Corporation and against the master agreement to make sure there weren't any conflicts or disagreements there. And add my thanks to Katz Teller for cleaning it up at the end, because that made a big difference. There was lots at one point of duplication and so forth, but substantively, we think it's where it ought to be to have a conversation with the board. So Debbie has some specific items that we want to bring to your attention, and Father Graham has two of those that he wants to have us vote on in the future.
Okay, I'm going to ask that everyone have the document in front of them, because I get to do the laundry, so to speak. We're going to go through some sections, and I'll ask you to direct your attention to the document. Starting on page 1. I'm sure that everyone has had a chance to review this line by line, so.
Memorize it.
And memorized it. So what I'm going to do today is to direct your attention to certain sections of it that I think, and Sally agreed, really merit focus for today. On page 1, section 2, managers, composition, and qualification standards, paragraph 2. This is a paragraph that we think is very important because it speaks to not only the willingness and ability of the managers to devote the necessary time to discharge our duties, but one of the things that we want to make real clear is that regular attendance is expected, and that be at a majority of the board meetings. And this document references kind of a window of 11 meetings a year, but a minimum of 8. So we would ask that the managers really commit to being at the majority of the meetings.
Debbie, can I ask a question about that?
Mm-hmm.
As I read this paragraph, it seems to me the only way in which a manager could be removed for that is to have missed 3 in a row. We talk about attending a majority, but then the trigger of removing
Right.
someone only happens after missing 3 in a row.
Right.
So maybe, I don't know if that was intentional or not.
Well,
but-
That's a good comment.
We talked about this issue of attendance, and there have been some outages. So we thought that a trigger might be 3.
And I think that's a good one, but I think it may be worth saying, the way I read this, that's the only trigger for that discussion. And so we say that you're expected to attend a majority, but then you're only gonna have a conversation with the chair if you've missed 3 in a row. So I think we may just wanna
I think
change.
that warrants rewording, because that's
Suppose you
not
miss
needed.
every other one, for example.
Right, or you attend 2 a year and
And we may
miss.
also, it may also be worth discussing if there's anything other than just bad attendance that
Well,
might
there
want
is,
to
there
merit
is a
that
clause in
conversation.
here, and we talked about it a little bit. It reads like an employment at will clause about a manager can be removed for,
Anyways.
any reason at all. So, you might want to comment on that, because I made a comment on that clause when I saw that about removal of a manager for any reason.
I mean, that's pretty much right. There's broad discretion for any reason in that particular paragraph. I agree, though, that it warrants at least rewording in this one. Probably just a broadening to give more discretion in the event that the board feels that there's an issue. It doesn't necessarily have to be 3, although 3 could be a trigger. Like you said, if there's an absence and then you go to the next meeting, there's an absence, you go to the next meeting, I think at some point in time, the board will start to pick up that there is an issue there that needs to be addressed.
So we've noted that as,
Yeah.
thank you, Micah. Moving on to page 2, section 4, board independence. Paragraph A, annual interest and relationship disclosure statement is based upon the need to develop and sustain public trust. Annually, we should have board managers complete such a statement for any potential conflicts of interest. And attached to your mailing was such a statement. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And that would start this year. So I draw your attention to that section. Any comments? Under board independence. Okay, the next one that I had was on page 3, section 5, This just lists, I'm bringing this to your attention, not pointing out anything specific, but would ask you to read this because this is basically our responsibility as board members and as the board entity. The next really big one, and I'll ask Sally to jump in on this and Father Graham, this has to do with board tenure. Many of us, when we joined, we had a vision of a certain number of years of serving on this illustrious board. Some of us are the class of 18, some of us are the class of 19, and some of us are the class of 2020. So as we look at the LLC document and the master agreement, one of the things that the LLC document calls for is that our year is basically a fiscal year from July through June, and it sets forth that the annual meeting must be in the first 4 months of our fiscal year, which either would be July, August, September, or October. So we benchmark September as our annual meeting. So what we did was to give everyone the gift of time by expanding terms by 6 months.
To add a little further, while we were appointed in January, we didn't really get started till well into March and into April. So people whose terms were to expire in the first year, we would only serve 4, 5, 6 months. So we added a year to that, essentially, or
It was kind of like
proposing.
preschool.
Yeah, we had to, you needed an extra year. So anyway, in order to make, because it's taking us a while to really get into it, we just are proposing to extend it by that amount of time. And the first year's service, for instance, will be whatever it says here, about 18 months.
It's 18 months.
Yeah, and the second year will be
30.
2 years and
Yeah.
6 months, et cetera.
Any comments on that?
We actually had that kind of a conversation, as I recall, at the retreat. You know, that it didn't make any sense to have people cycling off after just a couple of months. So I think you captured the sentiment that I remember from that conversation.
The next one is section 8, page 4. Board committees. This calls for 4 standing committees, including the executive committee. And those committees would be the Finance and Audit Committee, and that's provided for in the master agreement as the Finance Working Group. The second committee would be a Governance Committee, a Community Engagement Committee, and the Premier Committee in that group would be the Executive Committee, which we already have. If you remember, early on, 3 of us agreed to be the Executive Committee because we were the quote-unquote appointed officers, Pastor Tate, Father Graham, and myself. And quietly, I kept saying, help, help. And the response was that committee would be expanded. So this calls for expanding the Executive Committee to 6 members. And those members would be the chair of the board, who serves as the chair of the Executive Committee, the chair of the Finance and Audit Committee, the chair of the Governance Committee, the Community Engagement Committee, and 2 at-large members to be appointed by the chair. And again, we would follow the way we started. Each entity would have 2 members of the 6. So it's important to note that this is really important because it's pretty prescriptive in terms of expanding the role, the initial descriptions, and they could change later on, of the Governance Committee, Community Engagement, and the Finance and Audit Committee. So, do you want to say anything about this?
No, but what you just said triggered a different thought, and that is that these differ from bylaws. Some people are used to bylaws of an organization in that they are easier to change and they're what we agree on how we're operating, but they're not as hard to change as an organization's bylaws, so that we can choose at any point to make changes by a majority vote of the board to these. So Debbie said something about changing, and we should look at it this way. This is a living document. Once we settle on what we approve, it's going to be reviewed each year by the governance committee and at other times where we want to make changes.
That's very helpful to know, because you know what, this all seems to make great sense as we're going through it. I'm sure we'll learn things that we
Exactly.
Yeah.
didn't think about.
You hit the speed bumps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I may make a comment, actually, it's on page 5. It makes sense to me to define under this section, the board committees, the executive, and the others. I'm not sure that we need to define the CEO search committee, because that's the kind of ad hoc committee that we are going to set up from time to time, provision for which is made in these governance principles.
Agreed.
That
Yeah.
said, what we might do is reformat it such that the paragraph on the executive committee becomes A, finance and audit committee becomes B, governance committee C, and community engagement committee becomes D. So that the executive committee is treated as, in the same formatting as the other several committees.
I think there's another key point on this page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the sixth paragraph that starts, the governance committee shall nominate the board chair and a slate of executive officers, each of which shall be approved at the annual meeting upon the affirmative vote of the majority of the board. And this is, well, we talked about this at the executive committee, and this is very important to point out, because this speaks to a different methodology than we had when we started. The trusted entity appointed the board chair and appointed the 2 officers of the board. So this is a very important difference, and we saw this as a maturation of the board, but we hope that we're not premature in doing this. So this is a very important paragraph.
It's the board having the ability to organize itself as opposed to being organized by someone else.
Any comments on that? Okay.
A comment that I made at the executive committee, and I'll just lateral over to you folks as well, I'm wondering about terms. So consideration shall be given to rotating committee members and chairs periodically, but the board does not have a formal policy of rotating committee assignments or chairs. I would think that the board chair is a special case. And so I'll give it to you folks to think about, and you can decide what you want to do. If you decide, no, let's not have a term limit for the board chair, or if you think that there should be. My bias would be that there ought to be.
We talked about that, and when I was going back through this to do my notes, I didn't see that depicted in here. We talked about a 3-year term for the board chair from a continuity standpoint. I've been on boards where it's year to year, like the school board, where you're elected year to year as a president, and you never know, how that's going to go. So we did talk about that point. So I'd like to know what you all at the executive committee, what you think about that.
Yeah.
I would agree there should be a limit on the board chairs. Ray.
You think 3 years?
I was going to say, as long as it's Father Graham, I don't think we should ever let him go. But maybe the next
Funny that he's the one that
person.
brought this up.
We want a preschool dictator.
Yeah, that's right. Right, let's change, yes, we'll change the term to dictator.
Do you have any thoughts about that? We threw the number out of 3 years max.
Yeah, I would think 2 to 3. I agree with you. One's just.
You're just getting started.
Right.
And I like the idea of going up to 3, and circumstances may, just depending on where we are and what competencies we need in that role.
That's a very good idea. I
Yeah.
like up to 3.
I like that.
Yeah. Because the election is annual,
Right.
and so there's always, as it were, the opt-out opportunity.
Okay, moving to the next page, section 10, board operations. I'm not going to go through all of this because this really is operational. and speaks to, frequency of meetings, meeting notices, executive sessions, et cetera. And I think the last thing that I had to point out is on page 8, appointment of officers, and it describes the officer's position and kind of a description of what their responsibilities are. So that's my kind of walking you all through this document and things that we agreed were really important to point out and direct your attention to. You may have other considerations that we would like to hear from you now, because I think one of the things that is very important is that the United Way, Cincinnati Public Schools, and Cincinnati Preschool Alliance see this document, not to approve it, but there are parts that I walked through that are very important and speak to nominating processes, tenure, et cetera. So it does need a little bit more scrubbing, Jacob, if you would help us out. But I'm finished with my work.
Does anybody have, and first of all, Debbie and Sally, thank you very much once again for, this is tough work, going through this thing with a fine-tooth comb as you did. So thank you, and Jacob for your good eye. Does anybody have any additional questions that they would like to raise or comments that they would like to make on the document? As I said, I have 2 specific issues I want to zero in on once we're done with this part of the conversation.
I think they should be celebrated a little bit more because their work has brought us closer to full board engagement and full board operation.
So like, should we do a wave?
You should do a wave.
Thank you, thank you. Well, if there's no other comments, let me get to the 2 issues that I set up. If you go to page 5, please. Paragraph beginning the governance committee. Note that 4th line down, or 3rd and 4th line down, the person elected as the treasurer shall also be the chairperson of the finance committee or the financial working group. And so Pastor Tate is the treasurer of this group. And so in that capacity on the executive committee, when we formally pass this document next month, he will, under this provision, then become the chair of the finance working group. I would like to propose that we accelerate that process to today, such that kind of clarifies things, so he's able to call meetings and all that sort of stuff. At any rate, Pastor Tate, is there anything you would like to say about that? We've had the conversation offline.
I think Stephanie and Jan and Theo have worked diligently to make sure that all of the financials that we need in place and what we're concerned about is always at the front of our agenda. So I want to continue that relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we simply think it would be wise to sort of, as it were, regularize Pastor Tate's role now, rather than simply wait artificially for the next meeting where we will adopt these governance documents. This is presuming that this sentence will not change. I think that that's probably a fairly safe presumption. Is there any discussion on that? Does it seem like a reasonable thing to do? Could I have a motion to this effect then?
So moved.
Thank you, Tim.
Second.
And Sally. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Therefore, let the minutes show that on a vote on a motion made by Tim Fogarty and seconded by Sally Westheimer, that we adopted this part of the governance principles now, and therefore Pastor Tate is now chairs officially the finance working group. So, which sort of just officially recognizes what, in point of fact, you already kind of do, you know. So, and we'll get to you in a moment. So the second issue has to do with a vote taken at the June 22nd meeting. And since I wasn't there, I'm going to defer to those who were to kind of brief us on it. Essentially, you looked at a conflict of interest policy and approved it, which turns out to have probably not been the right one. And so what we want to do is rescind that motion and then direct your attention to this, this revised conflict of interest statement, which we will adopt with the governance principles next month. So I don't know if Debbie, you or Stephanie, you would have any further comment on that. That's a kind of a brief sense as to what the relevant issue is, but for further detail, I'll invite.
The only thing I would say is that both have been adapted from United Way policies as it relates to staff, conflict of interest disclosure, and also there's a separate one for board and volunteers. The one that you see in front of you today is specific to board volunteers at United Way, but then adapted for the preschool promise. It's a more appropriate statement. The other one that was approved last month was really more specific for staff. And the staff of the preschool promise will have to have a conflict of interest disclosure and acknowledgement as well.
One of the things that I thought we were doing when we did that was to approve a conflict of interest policy, which was required to move forward with our 501c3 filing. So my question is, what documents do we really need? Did we file with the wrong documents?
That hasn't been filed.
So,
Yeah, the 501c3 has a lengthier list of requirements, and we're working through that list with Jill Johnson. It includes bios on all the board members. We're still chasing some bios for board members, but there's another list of things that we have to have, including a conflict of interest policy, a record retention policy, a whistleblower policy. For all of those things need to be in development. And so it wasn't as simple as a conflict of interest statement. It was that and a number of other documents.
What I hear you saying is we have plenty of time.
Well, the sooner we get it filed,
Right,
the
right.
sooner we'll get it back, and even that, getting the response is longer than we'd like. So until that time, we've been using the United Way 501c3 for purchases and just doing an exchange so that we aren't taxed on things.
But at least
that
we have
don't
until
want.
August.
Yes.
We have until August. Thank you for the question. So with that said, did you have?
I made the original motion.
Oh, thank you.
To adopt the conflict of interest policy, and it was seconded by John, and it was unanimously approved. So, I will rescind my motion. I don't know how we replace John, if somebody will, on.
Chair's prerogative.
Yeah, so I'll rescind, my motion to approve the conflict of interest policy, which was distributed to us in June.
In favor of waiting to adopt revised policy
Exactly.
next month.
Exactly.
So I think that the motion ought to include that language, such that we're agreeing that one of these things is important. Okay. So, any further conversation on this? All those in favor of rescinding?
We
Oh, I'm
need
s-
a second.
Oh,
Did he second?
I did,
Okay.
I did, yeah, in John's absence, right. No worries, no worries. All those in favor then? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Good, or abstaining? So let the minutes show that on a motion duly made by Debbie Alsop, seconded by myself, that the board voted to rescind the relevant motion from the June 22nd meeting, and in light of the fact that we'll adopt a new conflict of interest policy next month. Good. I think that brings us to the Finance Working Group, so Pastor Tate.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Kelly Grant. We are going to just give a couple of updates where we are with our Finance Working Group and some of the work that we've done over the past 30 days as it relates to the budget and some other things. One of the things that we want to kind of bring you up to speed on is Jen Wagner, who is the CFO for CPS, Jill Johnson, who is the CFO for the United Way, Stephanie Bird, and the Financial Working Group began to talk about ways to make sure that the working group was considering the other persons, how they do their business. And so a lot of questions came up about how we would do our audits and things of that nature, and what the department or the state auditor would require of us as we work together. And through Jen's work, through Jill's work, and Stephanie's work, you will have a document in front of you that kind of gives some of the responses to the questions that were asked of the State Auditor's Department or office regarding some of our reporting and or audits and how we would function as a collective body. So I don't want to go through all of those things, but some of those most of those questions have been answered. There are still some that are still outstanding, but it is unique. This particular group is unique, and the state auditor understands the uniqueness of our work and has provided individuals to answer questions at our disposal. So Jan, Jill, and Stephanie continue to pose questions so that we are very clear about how we're going to function as a working group. So if you have any questions about that, let us know. But it is very important that we understand how to work together, especially as it relates to public funds. Jen has a hefty responsibility of keeping up and being fiduciarily responsible for state funding, and as those funds are being passed to United Way and then on to the CPP, we want to make sure that all of the regulations and guidelines that are applied to this work are being observed and complied with. So thank you very much. So just be mindful of those questions. If you have any questions, let me know. Secondly, I want to talk about the short-term or short-year budget that we approved early on. We actually put it out in March or April. This year was $1.5 million. And from that point, we have been operating on that short-term budget, which was from January to June 30th. And so again, the working group has been working to try to make sure that those funds that were allocated are not only accounted for, but the necessary line items are correctly filtered so that the expenses and or incomes are appropriately recognized. So we have to date, we have through that $1.5 million, we have worked to get billing for $1.3 million of that, and we are working to finalize some additional bills that have yet to be submitted, or invoices. And the way the process works is once we receive the invoices, then Jan, Jill, and Stephanie work together to make sure that they're applied to our budget and they go from projected to actual. So currently our actual reflects a $378,000 expense, or our expenses, which is a $988,000 difference between our budget and our projected actual. So we are working with Stephanie and others to make sure that our vendors who are supposed to be submitting invoices get those invoices in. Even though we know that June 30th has passed and we are currently working in our year one budget, some of those outstanding expenses will be recognized and we will adjust accordingly when the time comes. Okay, any questions about that? Yes, sir, Ms. Richardson.
I had a question about something before you got to that. The question of open records, whether or not the entity would be subject to it. And the way I read it is, you're going to ask your attorneys what to do. Shouldn't it be open records anyway, if it's public money?
Well, here's the dilemma, and Stephanie can jump in. The challenge was if we were not careful, then the United Ways, the organization United Way, would not fall under those same guidelines. And so the challenge was how does the United Way, CPP, and CPS apply, or how does the open records apply to both those organizations? And that's what we were waiting to hear from the auditor. So
it says here that you're going to check with your attorneys.
the United Way is going to check with their attorneys. So
where's it stand now?
So the Preschool Promise is operating under open records and open meetings. So we are following under whatever the state requires in that regard, as does the district. United Way is investigating that, has gotten some feedback from their attorneys on where United Way stands. It's not as clear. There is case law to support that United Way would not be subject. There's case law that would support that it would be. So we're still getting further clarification from the attorneys on that.
I mean, would it be open records just with respect to this?
For United Way, you're saying, or?
Just the deal with the.
Yes, relative to the preschool promise transactions. Yeah.
And they're checking to see if they don't have to comply with that.
Right, that's right. But the preschool promise does regardless.
Any other questions? Yes. Yes, sir.
Pastor Tate, and Brother Graham, what's your name? Pastor Graham? My name is plain old Brother Powell. What I did before for 44 is not here. I stood every day at the board elections for 44. We went door to door around the whole city. There's two words I need to hear. Diversity, and you didn't say inclusion. Is there a political correct reason that you didn't say African American community? Because, and I say it for this reason, trust me, the community, African American community does not trust what we just did. So they want some accountability. Me and Mike was on buzz. I told Mike, remember two things, race and money. As soon as we opened the radio, what did the caller say? Brother Powell, how you on the board like us? I said, I don't know, ask Mike. If we're 70% of the city, they want to see 70% of people on the committees and the boards that look like us. Pastor Tate, well, trust the community. But the question I'm asking when you talk about the numbers, the money, will there be transparency of the inclusion? Will they look like us to get the money? So, Pastor, it's Brother Graham? I mean, it's like Bishop Graham. But, say his name again? Father Graham. Father Graham. I would like to see the board and the committee continue to look like more like me and Pastor Tate, that you already know. I trust you. So I would like the transparency where the money is specifically going to be put into the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I just need to provide clarity, through the tuition assistance dollars and the quality improvement dollars,
Yes, sir.
those centers will be well represented.
When we did the board election, every day people came to me that looked like us. The problem is I had the White Tilly, Pastor Lynch, and Pastor Bingo say the problem with the system, Powell United Way, is that we have to get a communication gap broken. The people, the children look like us, and we need the money to look like us. So that's all I'm stressing to Father Graham.
Yes, sir. It will filter down.
Thank you, and continue with that communication, because it should look just like us. Thank you.
So, we talked about some of the budget items on the short-term budget. One of the things that we're still working on is a service agreement between United Way and Preschool Promise as to how to identify the expenses that come through the United Way into the Preschool Promise budget, and then how those funds are applied to the line items. So we are working on that service agreement. Once it's complete and finalized, you will also get idea of what that looks like and how it's going to be documented in the budget so that everybody will know. And then finally, we're still working there was a line item in the budget for special ed education support through CPS, and that 6% budgetary line item is under review. And once we have clarity from our steering committee, those that are working from CPS, CPP, and United Way, once we have clarity on what that looks like, that piece of it will also be reported to the board as well. Right. And don't want to forget, in June, we also, the Preschool Promise Board voted for our year one budget, and that budget is going to be moving into effect, and it was in the sum total of $15,150,000 plus dollars. So we'll start working on reporting that as well. Right, that's my report, sir. And I have some resolutions.
I was going to say my recollection was
Yes,
the
resolutions. I do.
So there's a document in your material dated July 11, 2017. That document was reviewed at the recent executive committee meeting, and we voted to forward it to you. We approved it and voted to forward it to you for your approval. So with that background, Pastor Tate.
Audit was a concern, as you've heard over these last couple of hours or close to, about the audits. One of the things that dilemmas we ran into was how we would audit. And initially we talked about two options. One would be a unified audit with all of the Preschool Promise dollars for CPS, CPP, and the United Way. And after much discussion, we realized that that probably would be more than we would have to do. So we agreed that we would do an individual audit between all three entities. And once United Way and CPS have done their audits, which they're required to do, there'll be a segment of their audits that would be incorporated into the audit for the Preschool Promise concerning the levy dollars for the Preschool Promise. And so with that, we're bringing that resolution to the board today to vote on that option so that we can move forward on that option to initiate an audit of the Cincinnati Preschool Promise. And once we do that, then of course, the other two entities will initiate their respective audits as well. But we need your approval to start our audit process because we are on a timeline and we want to get that done as soon as possible. So that's the first resolution. I'll move to the second one after that, unless you want me to do both of them.
No. Any further, any questions that people may have? Yes.
I think what I heard from you was that we will be able to see the whole picture, but it will be in pieces.
Pieces, yes, ma'am.
Okay, but the whole will be.
Yes, ma'am, it
okay.
will be available.
Great.
Debbie?
The only comment that I had, I made it at the executive committee meeting, was about the request for proposal and circulation of that, a list that would include minority and women businesses, and I had a number of organizations to suggest, and I'm sure others do, but I think that's a very important list.
Thank you for reminding us of that.
I'll make the motion Pastor Tate requested.
Thank you, Micah. A second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any further conversation? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Those abstaining? So let the minutes show that upon a motion by Micah Camera, seconded by Cheryl Rose, the board approved Pastor Tate's first resolution.
Okay. The second resolution is, after we have approved this one, that we would be given the empowered to move forward to select a company or an organization to actually do the audit. And so the United Way and Jill and I met to talk about particular or specific accounting firms, and we used a benchmark of accounting firms that have at least 40 or more accountants on their staff to be able to send an RFP out that would hopefully allow us to have a firm that's capable of doing an audit of this small magnitude in a short period of time. And so I know, to Debbie's point, having minorities and women-owned businesses as a part of our reach is definitely a part of our process. But we need your approval to at least put the RFP together and initiate the RFP process. And then we will include a list of 18 firms that we've identified that have 40 or more accountants on staff here in our city, in our region, and then with other recommendations for other accounting firms and or individuals to compile that list and then move forward with the RFP process.
Might I just say to that, okay, so if you're using that benchmark of 40 or more accountants, I would be interested within that hemisphere of their female and minority employment, asking them specifically.
I wanted to ask that question as well. You know, in that group of 18
Yes.
firms that rise to that level, so what are we looking at in terms of?
I don't know the composition, and I can't give that data. I would say, just from the list that I read, that it does not specifically say who the owner is or the ethnicity of the owner. But I will say that 18 in that benchmark is not solid. If we decide that we want to do something different, then we're open to that. We are willing to take recommendations from board members who may know individuals who could provide that kind of service. The only challenge is the timeline.
What is that?
The timeline, we have to have this done by October the 31st. So that means this next couple of weeks, getting the RFP out and to those respective companies, doing a review process, doing an interview process, bringing them on board, getting them the necessary documentations that they need, and then giving them the time that they need to conduct the audit.
Question?
Yeah, I have a question. How did you come up with that criteria, the 40 accountants, because you automatically eliminate any small minority-owned accounting firms? By setting that criteria, you're automatically knocking off a big portion of the smaller companies.
And again, it was just a starting point, because again, the nature of the request or the audit is at this time in this season, you have to have a company that has enough accountants on staff to be able to do the audit. If that's a 1 or 2 man team and they can do it, as long as they can get it done in the time frame that we need.
But if you're going to have the criteria that you have to have 40 accountants.
Remember, it's open now, that's not solid. That's why we're bringing it to the board.
I thought that's what you were saying.
No, I said we started out with that initiative, we would look at accountants, companies that have 40 or more. Just because of the.
Here's what I would suggest. So I understand that since we are probably going to be going to firms who are already busy doing other business, and we're going to need to make sure that they've got the capacity to do this in the time frame that makes sense to us, I think it makes sense to have some number. I don't know if it's 40 or whatever. What I would say is once you make that cut, then vet that list in terms of what it's represent, or what the firms look like in terms of minority or women ownership. Okay. And to the degree that you have a sense that, the number here is just not what we want it to be, then intentionally pull in other firms. A comment?
If I may, just as an observer, I have a couple of questions to ask. First of all, when you're looking for the criteria for who the accounting firm should be, take into consideration what kind of businesses they have done before and whether or not they can handle the nonprofit side of it as to the way that you need to have that done. So that, of course, is the criteria that you need to take into consideration also. And what will happen with whether they're minority or not, your criteria will flush some of those folks at the beginning. And then, of course, once you start to do your interviews, you'll be able to see that. My question, because of the timing and your urgency here, is what period of time will this particular audit that you are doing now cover?
It will cover the short-term budget that we did.
January to June.
January to June.
I'd like to have a date.
January to June.
January to June.
June 30th, yes, ma'am.
So that'll be even more of a different kind of accounting firm that you will have in, because that same criteria, say if it was a full year, would be very different from what they're going to do for the 6 months.
That's correct.
Because you won't have as much documentation for them to go through, et cetera, et cetera. But do be very careful, because your reporting of your audit will be a footnote, I hope, somewhere in CPS's audit.
That's correct.
And then, of course, that will also, a footnote will be there for the United Way's audit of the preschool promise piece of it. And so all those things will tie together, but what you don't want to do is get lost in trying to spend a lot of money to have an audit done.
I agree.
A question suddenly occurs to me as well, Pastor Tate. Is it imagined that this auditor would be somebody with whom we would go forward on an annual basis? Or is this is just a 1 year and we come back, when we need to have an audit for the first complete year and reopen the process all over again?
In my experience, we've contracted with one auditor who does the report annually, as it's required.
Well, and so in other words, I think if that's the case, it's important that the board be clear that they aren't simply signing somebody up for a year, or approving the engagement for a year, but a multiple of years.
But another question I'd like to raise is, given the short time frame that we have, and having gone through this with trying to find a search firm, I can tell you that it didn't go smoothly. I mean, it was a really difficult and lengthy process. Would it make sense in this instance for this short time frame to make an exception and perhaps utilize United Way, whoever does United Way's audit, given if they have the capacity to do it quickly?
Well, Jill Johnson, who is the CFO for United Way, ruled that out.
She did?
She ruled that out.
Because you don't want to,
That's
okay,
correct.
I got it, that
That's
makes
correct.
sense, yes.
She did a great job. She ruled out any accounting firm that has any affiliation with United Way.
I understand.
And of those 22 people on the list, 7 of those were connected some way to United Way, so they were not considered. So the rest were firms that did not have any affiliation with United Way, have done any work for United Way.
If I could back up from the conversation, it strikes me that what the board is of course anxious that this be done, and move forward in a swift manner. I think we've been clear that the issue of diverse representation for all of our vendors is critical. We've had that conversation at virtually every single meeting. And so, you know, Pastor Tate, we trust you to do a good job with respect to vetting prospective auditors with respect to with this category. So that said, you know, with understanding the board's interest and the community's interest indeed in making sure that we give due consideration to minority owned businesses and the like, can we move forward then with approval? I'll need a motion to do so.
What are you approving?
For their, we've approved kind of the audit format, if you will, and now what we're going to do is approve their ability to go ahead and hire an auditor.
I so move.
Thank you.
Second.
So, thanks to Lawrence.
Terry,
I'm sorry. Yeah. Let's get this right. So all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed or abstaining?
I abstain.
Thank you. So let the minutes show that upon a motion made by Sally Westheimer and seconded by Terry England, the board voted, let's figure out what the number is, 8-1, is that, or 801. Yeah, 8, with 8 affirmative, no negatives, and 1 abstention to allow Pastor Tate and the finance working group to move forward with the audit. The selection of an audit partner.
We are taking recommendations again for names of companies and individuals.
Should they come to you and Stephanie and Jill? How should I get that to you? All right.
And just to reinforce that for the entire room and the public, you know, I think when we are seeking diverse providers, they're often harder to find. So any information anyone has that would lead to that, I think it's very valuable to have that way.
That's good.
Yeah.
We're running a bit behind schedule. This is our custom. So I'll turn things over to Stephanie and urge her.
I'll get us back on schedule.
Doubtful, but do what you can.
Just a real quick update on the evaluation. You may recall from our June meeting that we had issued an RFP for evaluation services to about 36 different potential bidders. And it was around, the RFP was based on a fairly extensive scope that included multiple audiences, so children, parents, providers, teachers, as well as taxpayers for multiple years over the course of the 5 years in a very extensive logic model. And we got responses from 7 of the 36. And the range in estimates were from $50,000 to $880,000 a year. Yes. Which it goes well beyond the budget, and in fact, the scope was much broader than we really needed it to be. We had the best of intentions, great input from a lot of very skilled people who are knowledgeable about evaluation, but it took us well beyond where we needed to be. So we have regrouped, reissued the RFP based on a scope that's very specific to the first year of operation, leaving the door open for input from the respondents for their suggestions for what might happen in subsequent years, but with a specific focus on year 1 and with a priority for children, parents, programs, and we did not have taxpayers included in that, but we will make that point clear when we have our interviews with the selected vendors. So that RFP went out last Friday. The question and answer period ended, the RFP went out 2 Fridays ago. On the 7th, the question and answer period ended on Friday. Responses went out last night to the questions, and the proposals are now due on the 28th. We will, the evaluation ad hoc committee that includes John Pepper, Dr. Owens and Laura Sanregret will meet on the 31st by conference call. We have a scoring rubric that they all have received. We'll send the proposals that come back to them. They will score them. We'll have a conference call on that Monday and decide which ones we have come in for interviews later that week, with the goal of selecting the evaluation partner by the beginning of August. And so a very, very tight time frame. We really wanted to have the partner identified before the official launch of the program, which is August the 21st. Mark your calendars. The lights will blink and we'll all celebrate the first day of the Preschool Promise. But we do want to have the evaluation at least the evaluator on board so they can begin to gather the data, or at least we'll know what data is being collected for the purpose of the evaluation. So we'll keep you posted on that, and hopefully we'll be able to announce who that partner will be at our next meeting in August. So that is the evaluation update. Any questions about that? We are sending it back to, we did send it back to all 7 who responded, plus an additional RFP went out to a vendor who did not receive it initially. It went to someone else within that organization and it didn't get transferred over to the right person, so we allowed them to bid.
I have a point of clarification on this. I'm not sure of what the sum of money will be that we actually end up with the evaluator, but one of the things that we have not done is delegate authority to the staff to expend certain amounts of money. So my point is that this should come back to the board for approval on the 14th, rather than, an announcement.
Oh, recommendation to the board on the 14th?
Approval
Sure.
of the
Makes
money
sense.
and the vendor.
Yeah. And we do need to do the delegation of authority documents. That would be another governance committee responsibility, but yes.
Good point, thank you. Stephanie?
Okay. We have been about the business of trying to get staff on board. I'm happy to announce that we have 3 staff people who have accepted. Patty Craig, who is here with us today, stand up Patty, is joining us as the manager. She will join us on the 31st of August. July. Yeah. And also Florence, and Patty is with the Children's Home and has been in the early childhood field for many years, 30 years. And also has led the Promoting Resilient Children work, which is focused on social emotional development and managing children in the classroom.
It's great to see you here, Patty,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Also, Florence Malone is joining us on Monday.
Oh, you've recruited Florence?
Yes. And Florence is the participant relations specialist who will be out in the market knocking on doors, meeting with parents and with providers to educate them, kind of carrying on the work that Amos has done over the course of the last few months. Troubleshooting, because we do have a complex process, helping providers understand that process, also helping parents understand it. She's working on both sides of that equation and comes to us from Visions.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've worked with Visions Early Learning Center for the last 5 years. I've been their enrollment specialist, also along with their family advocate. So, some of you may be familiar with our program. We specialize in working with parents, but we've also merged with Children Inc. Over the last 3 years. So I'm very excited about being part of the team.
Yes. We have interviews underway for the remaining staff, parent-provider relations manager, a very good lead with an offer pending for that position, and about 6 interviews scheduled over the next week for a finance manager and also a marketing and community engagement manager. So we're hoping to have all of those folks on board by the time we press go in August. So more to come on staffing. The implementation team structure, you may remember, I think Father Graham mentioned this in the last meeting he attended in early June, that we had a very productive meeting with Laura Mitchell, who is the incoming superintendent for Cincinnati Public Schools, to really talk through how we function in a more coordinated way, to identify what our common goals are, in terms of recruiting children, to plan together as it relates to where we have quality deserts and addressing the needs for programs in the quality deserts, and really thinking about how we address barriers together instead of kind of in a parallel path. And she agreed that having an ongoing committee that's focused on how we implement together would be a good way to coordinate and communicate and make decisions that are uniform. And so we are proposing an implementation committee that includes the people who you see on the list here. And you may remember that as we got to a sticky point with the budget, we decided to step back and try and engage board members from both the Preschool Promise and Cincinnati Public Schools to help us kind of come up with a solution. We came up with a solution which included serving 4-year-olds and some 3-year-olds through a demonstration project, but that was largely because we were able to engage board members from CPS as well as from CPP. And so that group is going to continue to operate in somewhat of a steering committee fashion. We still have to work out the responsibilities and authority of these groups because we still have a finance work group, we still have a CPP board, we still have a CPS board, and a CPS finance committee, and so we have to be really clear about what these two groups are charged with and what the level and line of authority and reporting is. But the real issue and benefit is to have both boards coming together, talking through issues, and creating a more synergistic way of planning and implementing this program. And so we're hopeful. We've had several meetings over the last month of the implementation committee. Right now we're focused on how many children can we serve? Where are the children? Where are the quality deserts? What programs are there? We've looked at some maps to that effect. The board looked at maps back in April. We've kind of refined those with new data. And they're also looking at how the pilot for 3-year-olds or the demonstration project will roll out. So I just wanted to keep you all informed of that. We'll be working through the reporting structure, making sure that the ultimate decisions come back to our respective boards. We wanted to have this group in place to help us kind of get over the barriers that we, from time to time, encounter. Do you want to add to that?
No. The good news here is that these groups embody a cooperative spirit between CPP and CPS. That for me is the big good news.
Hi, my name is Anna. I'm with the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, and I brought a preschool teacher with me today. So we're talking about high quality and the barriers to it, and we're also talking about the budget and like figuring out how we can move things around. And this is Nakia.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nakia Morris. I'm a preschool teacher. I've been in this field for 7 years. When I first heard about
I want to ask if your comment is pertinent to this topic, and if so, please get to it quickly.
Yes.
Because we're already significantly behind in the agenda.
I understand.
well, basically my question is, what do you say to an educator like myself who's been in this field? You promised me $15 an hour, but now you're telling me that you won't have wages in the budget for educators for 2 years. So what information can you give to me to make me plead into this preschool promise?
Are you directing that to one in particular?
No, just, I mean, you were going over the budget, so that's why I wanted to ask the question.
I went over the budget, I didn't mention specifics, but the specific committees are working on trying to make sure that we bring clarity to those respective line items. So we don't have that in the first year budget, just because the priority is making sure we get families and kids enrolled. And so you will see those things begin to flesh out as the committees begin to report out how that's going to work. Again, this is a new startup, so some of those major details are still being worked out as we bring people together.
One of the conversations we've had is around the so-called cost of quality. So what is it that people like you on the front lines need to earn in order to make sure that we deliver on our promise? But we also know that that's going to require a huge amount of study in order to figure that out. And so there's a group that's actually being pulled together to help us wrap our arms around that. We need to let them do their work. That's going to take some time. As Pastor Tate said, our initial priority is making sure that we get kids in seats in August.
Just a point, that was a commitment made to Amos in the community for $15 an hour last summer.
We're very aware of that.
1 year ago. So saying it's being studied is concerning, and we can have more conversation about it. But
We'd be happy to
Yeah,
share with you
okay.
the group that's been pulled together
Okay.
that's looking at.
yeah, because if that's changed, no one's told us.
It has,
Okay.
that has not changed.
Okay.
Is it going to be
Okay.
implemented day one? It will not be.
That's the first I've heard that. And that's very concerning.
I
to me.
apologize for that, but that's the reality that we're in.
I have a concern.
Wow.
I know you're running out of time, but this is important. I really don't think that it should be pushed under the rug. We know for sure you cannot get quality unless you pay for it. And if you promise, you don't have to study it to know that people making $10 an hour cannot afford to work and live, just pay their basic bills. It's just not right. It's not the right thing to do. We don't need a study to know that.
The thing that we do know is that the rate that's being paid per child is not, we don't know for a fact that it is sufficient to pay all of the staff in a program at a rate that would allow that program to have wage equity across their preschool staff. We also don't know what the take-up is going to be that would warrant a program paying that rate. So with our ramp up, you may have one child in a program, and you're asking that program to change all of its wages based on that one child. We have to create, and I think everyone wants to make sure that teachers are paid well, that they're in the classrooms, that they're able to stay in those classrooms because it is that is the determinant of quality. But if we do it wrong, we could affect this industry and this community for a long time. Because we do not have, 8581 is a nice per child rate, but it is not sufficient. And so how we do that, it has to be well thought out and smart. We cannot put that burden on programs and not have them be able to sustain it. And right now we know that what they're getting is going to be for a 9-month program year for a 6.5-hour day, when the programs operate as much as 10 hours a day for 365 days a year. So that rate is not sufficient to cover the needs of the programs, to be able to pay the staff at a level that is sustainable and equitable across the program. It will also cause the infant and toddler programs, we suspect, to dry up because those teachers will quickly become preschool teachers, and the programs that we need for working families so they can have care for their infants and toddlers will not be available. And so we're looking at this in a way that allows our community to have all of the services that are necessary, and all teachers paid at a level that allows us to grow and children to thrive. That's where we are. And that's what we're bringing this group together to do.
Okay, so.
I'm going to postpone that. I'm going to postpone this conversation and put it offline.
But
You've expressed.
You need to bring community input, that's all I'm going to say.
Yes. And that the working group that we're pulling together for it will certainly do that. As you can see, the issue is a very complicated issue. It's not as simple as every teacher $15 an hour, period. It just isn't that simple.
Father Graham, just
Mike,
as a matter of schedule, in about 10 minutes, I'm going to have to get out of here, which I think will take us below quorum. So if there are any other items that need board approval,
That's my update.
I'd be hesitant to try to squeeze through in 10 minutes a conversation on loss of stars and provisional
We do need
rating.
these policies approved before the 21st, and they've seen these in previous meetings.
Fine, all right, well then let me tick through them quickly. So this goes back to it's the final sheets in the engagement, or in the packet that has at the top engagement and outreach from June and July. So if you just go back to the last several pages, page 8 in that has a list of what the so the questions are with respect to that we need to answer in a policy for providers who step up to quality rating decreases. So the following page 9 establishes that. It has 2 columns. with respect to providers, with respect to families, with respect to providers, the salient features are good swift notification of CPP. An appeals process would be put together. These would be reviewed on an ongoing basis. They'll have 12 months to recover their cost of their subject to quality rating. They'll be reimbursed regardless of what their rating had been at the 3-star level during that grace period. They will not be able to enroll additional students on a tuition assistance basis during the course of that time. And recall that one of the provisions in the master agreement is either tuition assistance or quality improvement, not both. And so they would, while continuing to receive tuition assistance, would not receive quality improvement dollars, but would receive, as it were, coaching assistance to try to recover their stars. For families, what we want to do is as it were, hold them harmless. So the principle is to acknowledge, to let the families in the program that's lost its stars know that has happened, that they will continue to receive tuition assistance dollars for a 12-month period. Anyway, so that's the important part. So that's the policy with respect to lost stars. Again, as Stephanie just said, you've seen that a moment in past meetings. And so that simply represents kind of where this policy is. So are there questions, comments that you would like to make with respect to it?
Well, you said they would still get the tuition assistance. Would they have to go to another facility?
No, at so in other words, that we're going to continue to regard that facility as sort of within the, continuing to be eligible to receive tuition assistance dollars for the students already enrolled, right? We want to make sure, again, that the families aren't sort of shortchanged in this. Okay, other comments? I'll need a motion to approve then.
So moved.
Thank you very much, Tim. Second?
Second.
Debbie, thank you. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstaining? So, on a motion duly made by Tim Fogarty and seconded by Debbie Alsa, the board has approved this policy for the CPP policy for lost stars. Let me move to the other one, which is the kind of at the other end. Suppose we know of preschool providers who are in process for applying for the stars, and we have so what we wanted to do was to craft a process that would allow us to begin working with them. You can see that we would have 1 or 2 star rated providers. These are technical terms beyond my ken. Sally knows them well. Apply after the data binder has been submitted. Unrated providers after a verification visit following the data binder. Our quality improvement people would do a special check, as it were, and then recommend to the board whether or not the particular provider should begin receiving tuition assistance dollars. The executive committee reviewed this at its meeting last week and approved it as it did the previous one, with the understanding that what would need to happen over time is a development, as it were, of a scorecard, such that the board only sees a very simple scorecard that makes sure that the due diligence has been done. It doesn't need to replicate the due diligence of the quality improvement people. And so we would need to develop that kind of mechanism that would facilitate our vote on these cases as they came to us. Stephanie, any further? So we'll need a motion on this as well. Cheryl, let's do discussion after we get the second. Cheryl, need a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Pastor Tate. Sally, or anyone else?
I just want to make sure that this process is such that if a parent wants to start preschool today, and the program has submitted its, whatever it needs to submit, this sounds like a multi-step process, and I just want to make sure that that program can be reimbursed for the care provided back to the date of enrollment. So that this, yeah, is that?
Yes.
Take,
I mean, I
yes?
think these are the kinds of policy decisions that we are going to encounter as we start operating, and need some leeway to be able to say yes, so we're not saying no, but then have a process in place going forward that allows us to say
So
yes.
family's ready, and it takes a certain amount of time to pull the council together and the coach and so forth, and just want to make sure that it's as fast as possible.
So we can craft language to revise the,
Right now,
to acknowledge that within the,
we don't have language that says that they won't. This is more permissive language saying that they will be reimbursed. Now, if we find after that site visit that the program is not going to receive that status, then they would be paid for that. I mean, this is what I'm thinking. They would be paid for that child, but no other children would be able to be enrolled. So it would be a grace for that child, but others would not be able to be enrolled.
So so in approving this, we will also have procedures that expedite the approval happening and the family being covered.
that would be something that the quality improvement folks would need to develop.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion? So could we, what we have, Cheryl's actually moved and Pastor Tate has seconded the motion to approve this, the deemed quality status, rating status policy. That's complicated. With the understanding, I think, that Sally just represented. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed or abstaining? So, good. So the minutes can show that after a motion by Cheryl Rose and seconded by Pastor Tate, that we approve this policy, I'll just call it this policy, with kind of the friendly commentary of Sally Westheimer. Thank you. Let's just end with the Parthenon EY transition. And we'll have to kind of, Vanessa and Ann leave you on it. Yeah, they've already kind of reported, really. So we have someone from Parthenon?
Is not here? I haven't seen anybody from
He's not
Parthenon.
here. David's not here.
Yes, right. I thought you said that somebody. Yeah.
No?
So we'll just let that go as well. So Haven Ladd came and spoke to the executive committee on last week, and in a nutshell, Parthenon EY feels very confident about the handoff that's going on. Their one concern is staffing up, because absent the staff, there aren't the people that they can interface with to kind of do the knowledge dump. So they're glad that people are being hired, and just urge us to continue doing that as quickly as possible. They also said that they would continue to be available for the occasional call, provided that we weren't sort of like trying to pull them into a business relationship or something like that. So they'll continue to be useful for us as we transition. So Pastor Tate, you were there, Debbie, you were there, Stephanie, anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add is that Haven gave us a slide presentation, 2 or 3 pages. It might be well to send that to the board.
It was in the pre-reading
Yeah,
material.
it was in the
Well, then that's all we need.
Right. Anything else? Good. Motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
All right. The executive committee is unanimous behind us then. All right. So all those in favor? Aye. Let the minutes show. 5, whatever it is. 17.